Good morning, YouTube. It's 11:54 a.m. Saturday, November 13th, 2021. Kind of wondering why I still do this because hardly anybody watches, and just doesn't seem to be any content here to speak of. It's just me generally rambling about what's going on in my life, and there's a whole lot of really nothing going on in my life. So I don't know, I actually reviewed some of them, and I'm just like, yeah, there's nothing here, nothing at all. I don't know. It's become sort of my digital diary, and that's something I always, it's something I always thought it would be nice to do kind of a diary or a log or something to kind of keep track of portions of my life. And there were a couple times where I've actually kind of sat down and used to do one in a notebook on paper, but those never really I don't know, I never really stuck with any of them nearly as long as I have this little vlogging on YouTube thing. I'm still pretty disappointed. Like, the most eventful one that I've shot in ages, if not ever, got inadvertently deleted by a bug in the iOS YouTube app. I mean, technically it got deleted by me, but what I did shouldn't have. There was a bug in the app, and what I did shouldn't have caused it to be deleted. But oh well, c'est la vie, shit happens. Oh gosh, yeah. So it's kind of weird. Like, I've had other periods in my life where I've kind of noticed that I've had ways of sort of documenting like what has gone on in my life, and been able to years later kind of look back at those documents to kind of remind myself of things that have happened, and jog my memory and whatnot. And like, one of the more notable ones, back when I used to own and operate my own cab company, I used to keep a ledger where I would track it's just a basic financial ledger more than anything. I would track every call that I answered myself, and how much that fare paid me, and then all my expenses, just to kind of give me a ballpark of how much I was making daily. I would average out whatever that month's communications bill was. I would average that out onto my daily ledger of how much that was per day, and then same thing with my insurance. Like, whatever it cost per month, I would average that out per day, and I would, every ledger would have an expense mark for insurance and for communications. And the communications also included whatever I was spending monthly for voicemail, landlines, pagers. Back in the day, pagers were part of the mix. And then other expenses would be noted by the day. And granted, this sounds boring as shit, and it was. And then I'd also have, when I had other drivers leasing cabs from me as well, and then owner-operators paying owner-operator fees to me for dispatch, for providing with calls and letting them use my logo. I also would have a mark that as money coming in, and although that sounds boring as shit, I found that I could go through those books, months later, even years later, and read through a page, and just seeing some of my notations in there would jog my memory about things that happened that day that weren't written whatsoever. But sometimes just seeing like three addresses and stuff together of and I made the notations of when the time calls came in as well, for all my cab runs, And it was weird, like I'd see maybe three, two, an address and then a grocery store and then a bar, all with the fares next to them and the numbers of the time that the call came in. And then I might see that there's like a 2-hour gap between that bar call and my next run that I had listed. And it would often like jog my memory of like, oh yeah, I ran into, whatever friend. It jogged my memory of like why that 2-hour gap was there. I would remember that I went, that I ran into somebody at that bar and ended up doubling back or having them roll with me on the fare and, doing whatever it was we did for 2 hours. And even though there was no notation of running into that friend and no notation of what we did in those 2 hours, I used to be able to look at something like that and it would remind me of it. Like the memories would come back, memories that were otherwise forgotten. The way people store memories is a fascinating concept. And of course, I'm no doctor. I'm a high school dropout, but I do read a lot. And every time I read something about that, it's always pretty fascinating. And it just seems like the more doctors learn about how memories are stored, and doctors and scientists, the more that they do research and learn about how memories are stored and accessed, it seems like the more they realize they don't know. And it's kind of funny. I mean, I read so much science and so much science fiction, and then you've got visionaries, true visionaries like Elon Musk talking about a potential neural link between computer devices and the human brain, and it certainly seems plausible. There's some guy coming up behind me on a bicycle. Doing all right? Good. This sidewalk doesn't have a lot of room for, I don't know, seems like a not cool place to ride a bicycle. Especially when you consider that right over there you've got the nice wide bike path. And 48th Street is also a very bicycle-friendly road. If you're going to ride in the street, there's room for, even though there's not a painted bike lane here, there's certainly room. And there he goes, into the street. Yeah, so I've been watching quite a few city planning related videos. One of my favorite, it's kind of weird, like one of my favorite and simultaneously least favorite channels on the subject is City Beautiful. And he just did a pretty entertaining video about high-speed light rail, or not light rail, my bad, high-speed rail in Texas, and how there's supposedly a plan to run rail from, I mean, it's not supposedly, there is a plan, there's a corporation involved. There's no set dates for completion, and this project seems to have been, over the years, going a lot slower than envisioned, and I'm sure there's financial reasons behind that. But anyway, talking about high-speed rail between Dallas and Houston. Now, I've never been to Dallas. I've been around Dallas. I've been north of Dallas, I've been south of Dallas, and west of Dallas, but I've never been to Dallas. And once I'm in a vehicle again and feel like I'm back in control of my life, Dallas is definitely a place I wish to visit. Not that I have any friends in Dallas. In fact, the only people I know in Dallas, and I use the term know very loosely, is Kathy and Dan, who run a website called Kate's Track Shack, which is a really old school website. It's been around since the, I want to say, mid-1990s, maybe even longer. And it's definitely the epitome of a website that sells online, that operates like a small mom and pop business, because it totally is a small mom and pop business. And all they sell is 8-track tapes, players, and accessories related to 8-track tapes and players. Oh, and also 4-track tape cartridges and those players. So kind of got to, even though that's a different format, kind of got to lump that in. In fact, I bought some of my 4-track tapes from them. Still don't have a player. Someday I'll find a player for that format, but right now I think I have a collection, maybe about 6 of those tapes. Not much. It's not much I'm missing out on. And I'm pretty sure every tape I have on a 4-track cartridge I've got on another format, so it's not like I'm missing that music. And some of those tapes that I have are actually factory sealed. I have no desire to break the seal on them. But anyway, I digress. Those are the only people that I know at all in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they're actually in a small suburb that's halfway between Dallas and Fort Worth. So they have thrown me out an open invitation that, hey, anytime you're passing through, come by and visit. Come check out the shack, which is, they've got pictures of the shack, and it's just basically I'm assuming like an outdoor garage or something that's houses all their piles and piles and piles of 8-track tape cartridges. So yeah, it's something that'd definitely be my number one destination going through Dallas and Fort Worth. But anyway, I digress. I was talking about City Beautiful's video, and what got me, now I have spent some time in Houston. Now granted, it was only maybe about, I'll say 4 or 5 days. It wasn't a very long period of time, but it was enough. And that was actually a road trip with my daughter, and I did enough. Not like we went all over Houston. In fact, we didn't really go to that many places in Houston, to be honest, but I feel like we went around enough for me to get a feel of what Houston is like. And it's kind of similar to Phoenix in many ways, in that it's very much a car-centric city that has public transportation, but a very, very, very small portion of the population actually uses that public transportation, and that portion that uses it is, for the most part, bus people. And by bus people, I mean people that are using transit because they're just straight up too poor to do anything else, which is kind of what I've been for the last 6 weeks. But that's not what I'm talking about. But anyway, and people's lives are all over the huge Houston area, which includes all the suburbs around it. And for the average Houstonian, downtown isn't part of their lifestyle whatsoever, which is also similar to Phoenix. The average Phoenician or somebody who lives in the Phoenix area and a surrounding suburb doesn't go downtown very often. I mean, if you're a Suns fan, maybe you go every now and then for a Suns game downtown to the Footprint Center. If you like concerts, you might go every now and then to concerts at the Footprint Center or at the whatever the hell Dodge Theater has been renamed to. But and if you have a job, like an office job downtown, obviously you're going there for that. You might occasionally go downtown for to go to court or for government offices. But the average Phoenician has zero reason to go downtown. In fact, when I mention, going downtown to a lot of people, they're like, oh, wow, I haven't been downtown in years. So an average person lives somewhere in the sprawl and works somewhere else in the sprawl. And the majority of their shopping and social life is in a certain size radius around where they live. And then they commute to work wherever else in the metropolis that is, and then they might have some friends or whatever in other locations, and might have some destinations, places they like to go, other locations, and then they go to events wherever those things are located, and they're not all downtown. And there's several other places where stadiums are located and concert venues are located and popular parks are located, and they're spread out throughout the city. And I'm talking about Phoenix right now. And I was in Houston enough to realize that Houston's the same sort of thing. For the average person, there's not much of interest downtown. In fact, one thing that really got me about downtown is that while there are many restaurants downtown, a surprisingly large amount of them close between 2 and 3 p.m. because hardly anybody lives downtown. There's not much in the way of nightlife downtown. And once the people who work in the office jobs that are located downtown, and there are a lot of them, once those people have lunch, there's just not a whole lot of reason for those restaurants to be open. Nobody's looking at downtown restaurants as a destination because most likely they live elsewhere in the sprawl of Houston. And if they're going to eat at a restaurant, they're going to go to one that's closer to where they live. Anyway, this video that was, and I'm assuming Dallas-Fort Worth to be similar. I mean, I've never been there, but I've seen maps of it, and I get the feeling it's the same kind of suburban sprawl concept as Houston and also as Phoenix. And that is my biggest critique of the City Beautiful video, talking about this light rail, because this light rail was, or not, I keep saying light rail out of habit, this high-speed rail, high-speed passenger rail. It kept talking about the locations of the stations and how it felt that it was going to be a failure because the location of these stations was not directly in the middle of downtown and didn't let you go in a walkable area where you could do everything's walkable. Yeah, nobody walks in Houston, except for, you know, the bus people and the homeless. Anybody who's got any kind of a life in Houston drives, and anybody that's going to Houston to do things in Houston is more likely than not going to rent a car so they can get to the places they're going by driving. Now, interestingly enough, when I took my trip to Houston, I didn't drive. I mean, my daughter and I tag team drove her car there, and I did drive her car a little bit while I was there, but not much. I know I'm not specifically on her insurance, so that's a potential, you know, complication I'd look to avoid. And I actually, when I was in Houston, and I enjoyed this a lot, I brought my Xiaomi scooter, which back then was in a lot better shape than it is now. And it was before the bug that I've mentioned in other vlogs, with the motor controller and the headlight and all that stuff not working. At this point, it was in perfect working order. And we stayed at a historic hotel. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was a little more costly than other places we could have stayed. But at the time, I had money saved up, points saved up. I did throw some of it on credit. There was a deal going on with my Fry's credit card and the Fry's app where I got double gas points or maybe quadruple gas points. It was something obscene for purchasing gift cards. So I was able to get the hotel room on Hotels.com, prepaying for the whole thing with Hotels.com gift cards, which were all purchased at Fry's at like the 4 times points. So maybe not the best deal on the hotel, but I got a lot of gas discounts and grocery discounts as a result of getting the hotel that way. And I deliberately picked out something that would put us each a walkable distance from, the event she went to was the national finals for FIRST Robotics. Or not national, I'm sorry, international. And it very international it was. I mean, there were people from all over the world at that competition. And I got us something that was historic. I've always kind of got a fascination with historic hotels. And somewhat luxurious. I mean, I want to say it was like a 3-star, maybe. Probably like a 3-star. Maybe a 4-star. And for that caliber of hotel and its location, it seemed pretty reasonably priced. And the caveat was that because it was in a 100-plus-year-old building, the rooms were pretty small, but they were very well equipped. I mean, we had 2 beds. We each had our own nightstand. I had enough room in front of my nightstand to charge my Xiaomi scooter, and then there was because it kind of caters to business clients, there was a desk with certain features. It was built around the concept of, hey, put your laptop here and you've got everything you need to connect to it and make the most of it and charge your phone and whatnot. And I actually brought my desktop computer that I do my karaoke off of with me, and I set it up, and it was kind of nice. I was able to actually work on some of my music while I was there in the hang time. I actually didn't do as much of that as I thought I might, but I did. And we had a damn nice, hotel, TV. Damn nice TV with a remote and all kinds of streaming options and cable options. So that was pretty good. But yeah, while I was there, I found I was able to get quite a few places via scooter. But in the grand scheme of how big Houston is, I was very limited. I did do a little public transit. To be honest, I never went any farther on transit than I could have gone on the scooter. And I found the scooter a lot more effective than transit. Now, to be fair, I don't feel I really gave myself a lot of time. I don't feel like I really put much effort into figuring out the transit. But being that I don't know anybody in Houston, and I don't really know of any places in Houston, I didn't have any destinations. Didn't have any destinations, out in the sprawl. So there was no point in me trying to figure out where I could get in the sprawl. But anyway, what I'm trying to make regarding this is that this City Beautiful video was all talking about how what the success of this high-speed rail project between Dallas and Houston would need is for a centrally located station and walkability and restaurants and hotels and blah 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 around these stations, and I couldn't disagree more. The reality is that those cities are far too big to be walkable. No matter what you put in them, they're far too big to be walkable. Even if both cities had a revolution in their public transit, it wouldn't change the fact that it's a long way from, say, downtown Houston to Katy. And most people going to Houston probably don't have any reason to be downtown. I some comments, people that were commenting on it. And of course, he made all the, the inevitable everything on that channel and most public transit channels criticizing the infrastructure in the United States. Always want to make the comparison to different parts of Europe. And the reality is that comparing a Western American city like Houston or Dallas or Phoenix or Los Angeles or Albuquerque, I could go on, trying to compare that type of a city to any European city is an extreme false equivalency. Those European cities, they're walkable because they were built hundreds, even thousands of years ago, or over 1,000 years ago plus, when people walked. And that's why they're laid out like that. Granted, you've got these small people that are fascinated by that sort of thing, and that's what these videos kind of cater to, and the kind of people that gravitate to these videos. But the reality is, that's not what most people are interested in. Most people that move to Texas, at least a lot of people I know, they move to Texas because it's an affordable place to buy a house. Not so they can live in a cracker box downtown, very expensive rental apartment. They want to buy an affordable house that gives them space. I mean, you can use the derogatory term McMansion if you want, but that's the American dream for most people, especially those that are raising families, is to have that driveway and that yard and that private backyard, and here in Phoenix, probably a swimming pool. Gotta love how here in Phoenix, the average lower middle class person has a swimming pool. It's just part of the culture here. People want a garage and a work shed that's theirs. They want space, and they also don't want their neighbors right up against them. And and I just don't see that changing. That's just the Western United States culture. People that move to these cities that are hoping for an experience like, living in Tokyo or living in New York City, they're just not going to find that. It's just as somebody who likes the experience, which I've previously had, and to be honest, in my current apartment, even almost had, of having space. I mean, I do have a front yard and a backyard. Granted, I share it with my neighbors, but I have that space. I don't have anybody living above me. I have a neighbor on each side, but overall, I have quite a bit of space. I have a covered reserved parking spot for my car whenever I get it back, and plenty of places to park other cars, and for people who visit me to park their cars, as that's how most Phoenicians get around. It is what it is. So yeah, it's kind of funny. So the whole focus of this video wasn't really about where the train was going to be and what it was going to cost to ride and how quickly it was going to get from Houston to Dallas, but about walkability around the stations. And I can't help but just think that's completely irrelevant. And to assume that people riding that are going to downtown Dallas or downtown Houston is just a laughable concept to me. And I put several comments, and I noticed a small minority of people, putting similar comments in, saying that, what was going to really make or break this, is Texans don't walk. What was going to make or break it is how much available parking there was at the stations, and what kind of options were available when you got to the other station at the other end of accessibility of a rental car. Because once you get to Dallas or Houston, if you left your car, and once you get to Houston, if you left your car in Dallas or vice versa, once you get to the other end, you're going to need a vehicle to get around if you're planning on going anywhere and doing anything. If you're just staying downtown, it's going to be very limiting, and that's something that's not going to change. Anyway, throwing that out there. That's and of course that's not a concept that people that were watching that video were wanting to really explore. But the reality is that people that would be potentially taking, and I did have one person responded to a comment I made about how, well, that would be so expensive, it'd probably be cheaper just to drive. Of course it would be. That's a no-brainer. The advantage to taking high-speed rail would be comparable to the advantage of flying. And there are a lot of people that fly from Dallas to Houston and from Houston to Dallas. I mean, it's just sort of like people who fly to LA from Phoenix, people who fly from Phoenix to LA, people who fly to Vegas. I mean, it's certainly cheaper to drive to LA and drive around LA from Phoenix than it is to fly to LA and rent a car when you get to LA. But the reality is, in LA, if you're not renting a car, you're going to find it very difficult to go to most of the places you want to go to. And people who fly that aren't doing it because it's cheaper. They're doing it because it's quicker. They're doing it because they don't want to spend 6 hours driving there and 6 hours driving back, when they can cut that down to probably 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how long it takes you to check in and get to Sky Harbor from where you live. On that note, I got a hell of an advantage on that because I can take public transit to Sky Harbor very quickly. Even when I have a car, I don't drive to Sky Harbor. It's pointless. Even an Uber is very expensive inexpensive to get to Sky Harbor from where I live. Anyway, this is not what I was planning on talking about in this video. I was actually talk about things that are going on with me as per usual, but it's kind of got on a tangent. That video about high-speed rail in Texas and the take of the misguided take by City Beautiful about it. It's kind of been in my mind as somebody who is doing a lot of walking in a city that's not really walkable or intended for people to walk in it. And granted, there's some walkable areas, but it's not where I'm at. That's not any of the places I'm going to. And I'm not changing my lifestyle to be around these walkable areas. Give me a break. I can't afford to live in those areas. Generally speaking, the businesses around those areas aren't of interest to me, except for 414 on Mill Avenue. But that's another story entirely. Spencer kind of soured that for me. Anyway, so I'm walking here to mail a record. I thought I would have 2 to mail today. I had somebody make me an offer on a Stevie Wonder album yesterday morning, and I didn't accept the offer right away because I thought it was a little on the low side. And I was kind of hoping that maybe the record would sell at full price, and I didn't really want to accept that low offer and then put myself in a bind with Allison and I maybe leaving for Portland. I'm having to ship that one. I'd rather sit on it. And I was thinking, well, you know what? I'll just wait and see if I sell another one, which, as you can see, I did. There's a Miles Davis album in there. And I figured, well, once that, I'll just see if I'll just accept that offer once I get the Miles Davis one packaged, and then I'll walk them both to the post office. And I'm surprised. It used to be an offer on eBay, lasted for 48 hours, and now they've been dropped down to 23 hours, which seems like a really erratic time. Like, what's 23 hours? Anyway, I realized that after it had been about 25 hours. So that offer, I missed it, which sucks because I really wanted to accept it, and it would have been nice to be here shipping 2 records rather than 1. But here I am, shipping 1. So that's what's up with that. Anyway, thanks for coming with me. Hope this wasn't too painfully boring for y'all. And if you enjoy my droning on about boring ass topics, like and subscribe, because I will be doing more of that forever.